Hi everyone, I'm very excited because the German Honor and Profit spoilers have just come out fresh from the factory. So now, without further ado, I'm going to make a public service announcement to everyone who is about to attend a regional tournament or any other Netrunner competition within the next week or so, and is going to face against Honor and Profit decks that threaten so much more flatline opportunities. My hope is that you can use this as a guide or a reference whenever you are playing as the runner, whenever you're accessing cards, facing ice, or checking a remote server. At least now you know what are the possible things that the corp can do to possibly kill you or cripple you. So let's begin. First, let's discuss the repercussions of accessing cards in various servers. Here is a diagram that illustrates the possible weapons that the corp might have even when you're accessing a card. As you can see, the safest place to try to score agendas from is R&D. In R&D, it's still more or less the same as it was pre-Honor and Profit, in that the worst that you can expect is 3 net damage from Snare and Fetal AI if you're running against Personal Evolution. And HQ is now a much more dangerous place to run, because before Honor and Profit, it already was a tendency that traps such as Snare and Fetal AIs would clog up in the runner's hand, in the corp's hand, ready for you to access when you run HQ. Now there's even more stuff for you to access, which is CQ. Remote servers are even more threatening because of the dangerous card that is Psychic Field, which only works when installed. The worst thing about Psychic Field is that its effect will fire off even if you expose the card. So that changes the whole dynamic of the game. Now exposing isn't the one and true counter to Jinteki anymore. You'll still get hit by a Psychic Field if you're not careful. Finally, archive running has been nerfed. That means data suckers and dirty laundering archives is not so viable anymore when you have CQs that are ready to fire off. Now, keep in mind that CQ will never flatline you. The only thing CQ will do at worst is to make you lose 1 agenda point. But still, it is very undesirable. So, at the end of the day, the safest place to run is still R&D. As long as you're prepared to take 3 net damage, you can't really get flatline from R&D unless you perform multi-access. Now, there's another way to neuter the threat of Jinteki, and that is through keeping them poor. If you keep them poor, the weapons that they have suddenly become this. They cannot fire off their snares, they cannot use CQ because CQ requires them to pay a certain number of credits, and Psychic Field can be activated, but requires the corp to play a side game. So the less credits they have, the less likely they are to succeed with the side game. So it's very simple. Keep the corp poor, keep yourself safe. No better way to do this than a count siphon. Yes, everyone's favorite card. So that's all for accessing cards. Now let's move on to blindly face checking ice. Jinteki and Honor Profit has some new ice that is really, really threatening and has definitely boosted the power level of Jinteki by quite a bit. Let's first talk about sentries, Jinteki sentries. So, what exactly can Jinteki do to you if you face check without the appropriate killer? Previously, the most severe repercussion is that you will take 3 net damage from either a Neuro Katana or Surugi. And if you are at a severe credit deficit from the corp, you might hit a Shinobi, which could cause even more damage, but that's about it. Now, things have changed. Now, if you run without a killer, you are saying to the corp, I'm willing to lose every single card in my hand. That's right. With the new Komainu, you will lose all your cards if you run without a sentry breaker. And it will cost the corp 5 to rest the Komainu. So keep that in mind. Secondly, even when you reach the late game and you have a Mimic out with a couple of Data Sucker tokens, that might not be enough to prevent 3 net damage and more because of the new Susano no Mikoto, which redirects you to archives. Redirecting you to archives is fine until you realize that you cannot check out until you encounter the next piece of ice. And if there's no ice in archives, you will be forced to access archives. And what's there in archives? There could be 3 shocks, there could be 3 CQs, ready to suck out all the agenda points that you worked so hard for. So without a strength 7 sentry breaker, be prepared for this repercussion when it comes to late game. I think This is evidence that Jinteki still has the kick in them when it comes to late game, because they still have potent cards such as this that can really set the runner very far back. Now moving on to code gates. What happens when you don't have the appropriate decoder? Previously, before Honor and Profit, the only repercussion is that you suffer 1 net damage from Yagura. Now, with Honor and Profit, running without decoders is much more dangerous, because now you're saying, I'm willing to take 3 net damage because of Shiro. Shiro will force you to access R&D, which means that you might encounter a snare. Moreover, if the server is protected by 2 or more pieces of ice, especially if unrest, be prepared to hit an Inazuma, which will force you to encounter and suffer the effects of the subroutines of the next piece of ice, whether you have the icebreaker to break the subsequent ice or not. This means that you could take 3 net damage from Nero Katana, or you could lose your entire hand to Komainu. Worst of all, as the runner, both of these code gates are strength 5, so you must be prepared to deal with strength 5 code gates if you do not want to suffer 3 net damage, or worse still, lose your entire hand. So that's for ice. Generally, it's still not enough to kill you. Yes, encountering ice by itself will not kill you. However, it will deter you from access, because after taking 3 net damage or losing your entire hand, you really don't want to access any more cards, access the server, which means that you have lost a lot of tempo from losing cards from your hand, and that you do not get any access, which means you don't score any agendas that you intended to do. If that sounds very scary for the runner, wait till you hear about this next item, which I feel is the one thing that will make Jinteki competitive, if it ever does become competitive. And that is Mushin No Shin. That's right. There has never been an easier way to install a card and place 3 advancement tokens on it in the same turn. Previously, the only way you could do this was with Matrix Analyzer or with some form of click extension such as Biotic Label or Director Haas. Now with Mushin No Shin, you can easily do this. And for the runner, having a 3 advanced remote server is very, very threatening. It's very dangerous because not only does it now make existing traps lethal, it also enables new combinations with some of the newly spoiled cards. Here's a diagram showing all the possibilities that you might encounter when checking a card that has been 3 advanced. Besides all the things that could happen to you when you check a remote, as mentioned earlier on, you might now hit a Junebug for 6 net damage. Worse, you could hit a Cerebral Overwriter and take 3 brain damage. Or, if you have an entire rig up, you could lose it all from an aggressive secretary. And probably the worst of them all is if you access a plan B. Because now that there are 3 advancement tokens on the remote card, the corp can actually score a card that he couldn't have scored from hand otherwise, a 3-2, such as Philotic Entanglement or Brain Trust, although I don't think most Jintekis will run Brain Trust anymore. The worst they could score is a House of Knives. House of Knives is, as I've said in my earlier Jinteki agenda video, a very, very dangerous agenda and well suited for the 3-1 agenda tier. Anyway, so that's Mushin No Shin. I hope you realize just how dangerous it is, and whenever a corp pulls one on you, you might just have to be prepared to let it go. Be prepared to concede the 4 or 5 advanced agenda, whatever it might be, because the risk of running it is usually very, very high, unless you know exactly what's in the opponent's deck. Or if you have some sort of exposed effect, which I think most runner decks will begin considering including in this current meta, with Mushin No Shin in the current card pool. Now, the final thing I want to touch on is upgrades. Jinteki in Honor and Profit has also received a couple of upgrades. Previously, an Unrest upgrade could either mean 1 net damage through Hokusai Grid, or a straight up end the run through Caprice Nisei. Now, an upgrade could easily mean taking 1 brain damage. So this is the first time ever that an Unrest upgrade with no advancement tokens can cause brain damage. I say no advancement token because it could be in a remote server. A remote server, you have Cerebral Overwriter with advancement tokens that can deal brain damage. But without any advancement tokens at all, with Tori Hanzo, now you can suffer brain damage if you're not careful. Now, the upside to Tori Hanzo is this. The court must res Tori Hanzo before the net damage is inflicted. This means that a server containing both Tori Hanzo and snare, the Tori Hanzo must be res first, and the runner must access the snare first, which won't happen. If the runner runs into a res Tori Hanzo, the runner will immediately trash the upgrade first before accessing any cards that might deal net damage. So realistically, the only way Tori Hanzo is going to fire off is if you have net damage ice in front, which the runner cannot break, or if you have a scored Cause of Knives. That is pretty powerful, but it's still worth keeping in mind that this only does brain damage for the first time. Subsequent runs, you won't encounter it because you should be trashing Tori Hanzo the moment you see it rest. Oh yes, and the other counter to Tori Hanzo is simple. Since Tori Hanzo costs 2 to rest, if you keep the court poor, there is nothing he can do to stop you. Because besides the rest cost, the court must also pay another 2 credits to convert the net damage into brain damage. So all in all, if there's one big thing that you can take away from this entire guide, this entire reference guide to how to deal with Jinteki, it's simple. Keep the court poor. Play the vamp, or more commonly now, play the account siphon. Thanks for watching, and I wish you the best of luck in your upcoming competitions. I hope you don't get flatlined too badly. See you around!